Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we are talking about the traditions. I decided that we're gonna talk about the traditions, obviously, but we're gonna talk about them based out of the AA 12 and 12, not the OA 12 and 12, because the AA 12 and 12 is where the traditions like started, where they came from. And I always like to go back to the source. So just very quick history, and don't think I'm like AA history buff or anything. It's literally in this book. So the AA was founded in 1934, 1935, and the big book was published in 1939. And AA as an organization was basically founded around that time, a little before the book, but the book sort of made it wider, cast a wider net. So for about 8 years, 7, 8 years, they were sort of in the figuring out phase of AA. And by 1946, they had incorporated the traditions. In 1950, they sort of ratified them as part of the World Service. So here's the thing. Why do we need traditions? And by the way, I am the type that it's like it's a tradition meeting, and I'm like, oh God, snooze. So we're going to try to make it as exciting and personal as possible because I don't know about you, but I only care if it applies to me. So let's go that way, okay? So bear with me just a little bit. But basically, we create the traditions. The steps are for me to have a spiritual experience so that I don't have to use food compulsively anymore. So I can be a functional, useful tool for God to use in this world. That's the point of the 12 steps, to have a spiritual experience that will outfit me to be use of God. It's not to get thin, it's not to be cute, it's not to be superior to anyone, it's not to feel good. All of those things are happy byproducts of working the 12 steps, but that's not the point. The point is that I need to become a God's agent in this world. And a lot of people get by on abstinence in meetings, and that's a-okay for them. And they have like a fairly moderately happy existence. I know people with long-term abstinence who have multiple sponsors and go to a lot of meetings. They're not so fun to be around, but they live moderately happily. So, okay. Um, in my opinion, and from my experience, to not work the steps is selling myself way short. Um, I'm really not taking advantage of like the treasure trove that this program has to offer. So that's what the 12 steps are for. The 12 traditions are to enable us to live and work together. Because here's the thing, right? I was listening to an AA share on the traditions this morning while I was walking my dog, and she talked about this old tiny comic strip called, can't remember, it was like a husband and wife. So the husband says to the wife, I feel like our neighbor is mad at me because I didn't lend him my rake. And the wife is like, well, why didn't you lend it to him? And he says, well, I don't really like loaning out my stuff. I feel like it has to do with me being an only child. And she's like, you weren't an only child. You had like brothers and sisters. And he said, yeah, but I was the only one that mattered. So, that's basically who we're dealing with. That's like me and every single other person in this program. So if my oversized ego is coming in here to get better, and I'm dealing with thousands of other oversized egos who are coming in here to get better, we need traditions and guidelines to help us work together because otherwise we're going to destroy this thing. That's what happens. So we need that sort of frame of reference for what the whole idea is, for us to get humble and put the welfare of this program first. And we're going to talk about that in tradition one. The welfare of this program, actually, that is actually perfect. That's a perfect segue into tradition one, right? Tradition one, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on AA unity. So, in other words, I come in here because I want to get better. But ultimately, if I want OA to continue existing, I have to put the good of OA first. And I'm also just going to read you the long form traditions in addition to the short ones because it gives a little bit more context. So the long form of tradition one is each member of Alcoholics Anonymous, or OA, is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterward. So, in other words, I have to put the survival of OA over my desire to have it be a certain way, or run a certain way, or be the OA star, or, have abstinence requirements, or blah, 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 blah. And in tradition one, it says most individuals cannot recover unless there is a group, right? So if I come into a group, and I actually had this experience because we started a group here where I live, and it was started by three women who I think who were more interested in group therapy than working OA. Maybe. What do I know? I don't know their initial intention, but I do know that when one of them invited me to come and I wanted to institute like principles and set up a real meeting in Treasury, there was some pushback. And some people even accused me of trying to take over the meeting and make it my meeting. So is that true? I will tell you honestly, no. Like, I'm not interested in being in charge of anything. I hate being in charge of things. I often end up being in charge of things because I'm good at being in charge of things, but I don't want more responsibility. So that's number one. What I did want was to establish a space where I could get recovery and anyone else who wanted recovery could get it. And that meant talking about the solution and talking about the big book and talking about the steps, because I can go to a meeting. I've been to plenty of meetings where people just dump and they want to just talk about what's going on and how crappy they feel or what's coming up for them in this moment. That's nice, but that's not recovery. That's just talking. I need to focus on the solution. And I felt like my job as someone in recovery, who has long-term recovery, and just someone who wants to establish an OA meeting, is to talk about OA, because that's what this is. And ultimately, we got some more people and we had some growing pains. But the original three people are no longer with us. I mean, they're on Earth, but like they're like not in our group anymore. They didn't die. We didn't kill them. Let's put it that way. They're still living. They don't come to the meeting anymore. Now, my intention was never to make anyone feel unwelcome, ever. And in fact, I sponsored two of those people. They just decided that what we had to offer wasn't for them at that time. Maybe they'll come back. Who knows? But the point was, the principles of OA had to come before me feeling comfortable or liked. Because of course I want everyone to like me. I want to be popular. And I even had one of the original founders, they like reamed me out, which a long time ago would have like made me completely fall apart. But I was just kind of like, wow, you're really, like, I didn't say this, but I was just like, this is a really spiritually sick person. And all I did say to them was, I don't have to accept this behavior, and everyone in this group deserves to feel safe. That's it, right? Personal recovery depends on OA unity. I have to protect the group so that I can recover. So if someone's behavior is not appropriate, again, I have to say something kindly and make a boundary. And I even said to this person, if you do not like how this group is being run, that's completely fine. You're welcome to share your opinions at our group conscience, and we'll go by group conscience vote. And if you still don't like group conscience vote, there are lots of other OA meetings you can go to where you might like how they do things better. But ultimately, it's not about me being the star. It's about protecting OA. As I said, the traditions are about how best to live and work together. And I'll just read this part of the tradition, right? In the world about us, we saw personalities destroying whole peoples. The struggle for wealth, power, and prestige was tearing humanity apart as never before. If strong people were stalemated in the search for peace and harmony, what was to become of our erratic band of alcoholics? So we all are a bunch of personalities. I will speak for myself here. I am a big personality. Now, not everybody in here like thinks that they're a huge diva, but we all come in here ego first, right? Because our ego is the essence of our problem. It says in step 3 that our problem is selfishness and self-centeredness. So whether you come in here feeling like you're the best in the world or whether you come in here feeling like you're the worst in the world, you're still thinking about yourself. And so or I should say, I'm still thinking about myself. So if I'm coming in here and trying to make this about me or how I feel comfortable, who I want here, like I said, there are people, I've been in meetings where there are people who like I genuinely don't like. I'm uncomfortable around them. I don't like them. I wish they would go to other meetings. I will never say I wish they weren't in OA anymore because I don't want that for them. I just want them to go away. Like I want them to go to a different meeting. But I will never tell them not to come to the meeting because they deserve it as much as I do. And I need a group. I need unity. I need a way to continue existing, even if I don't like every single person in the room. It doesn't matter. So they in the 12 and 12, they give an example of Eddie Rickenbacker, who I'd never heard of. But basically he and his team on their plane crashed in the Pacific and they found themselves safe from death, but floating on the perilous sea. How well they saw that their common welfare came first, right? None might become selfish of water or bread. Each needed to consider the others, and in abiding faith, they knew they must find their real strength. So that's basically us, right? Anybody who has come to this program has been saved from death. Particularly if you've gotten abstinent and are working a strong program at this point. Like you have literally been saved from death. So if I was capable of doing a program and having a recovery on my own, I would have done it already. But the fact of the matter is I couldn't do alone, which means I need to do it with you. So I need you, which means that I have to care about your welfare and how this meeting and this program works for you as well. Because if you go away, then I have nothing. So even though it's an intrinsically selfish motive, ultimately I have to be other-centered in order to make this work. That means that, let's say, for example, we have a meeting here that is Big Book focused. And when we moved locations, we forgot the format from the other meeting. So I said, okay, so let's just this week until we get the format, we'll just make this a Big Book meeting. And somebody in the group was like, no, we have the books here and we should vote. Now I was rolling my eyes and just being like, why? Just like, I wanted a Big Book meeting. Like, why not? And other people in the room wanted a Big Book meeting. But this person, called for a vote and we voted and I didn't get what I wanted. Like, what am I going to do? Throw a tantrum and leave? No, it's still a meeting. This is what we voted and that's it. So I have to get over myself. That's what this is. This whole thing is just about me getting over myself, just by the way. Okay. So, because if I want to play nice with other kids, I have to learn to share, right? This is all basically kindergarten. These are rules that none of us learned in kindergarten that we thought we learned in kindergarten, but we do not know how to play with other kids. We don't. Okay. Because if we did, we would not need this program. Okay. So let's jump to tradition 2 now. I'll read you the short form and the short form. Oh, this is the same. The short and the long form are the same in this one. Okay. So for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. So what's the difference between a governor and a servant? Very simple. A governor has authority. A servant does not. So anybody who is working in a service position has no authority in the group. They are serving the group. I went on a business meeting a few months ago. It was very, very interesting. There were some things that came up in the group that were being discussed, and there was some disagreement about it. And somebody from the intergroup office came in to talk about what the principles were, what the traditions were to help the group run. Now, they were literally just reporting what the traditions were and how, like, the guidelines brought down from intergroup of what was appropriate and what wasn't. And people got so pissed at her. They were like, what gives you the authority to tell us what to do? How can you come in here? You're not even a member of this group. And first of all, I was like half amused, half appalled. But the bottom line is she wasn't coming in with authority and telling us what to do. There was a dispute about the way things operate. We don't know what to do. So why don't we ask someone who has that information? She could report it and we could vote against it and we don't have to do it. But the fact is we didn't know and it was causing problems. So she's coming in as an act of service to help. That's what that is. So, the people who, got all mad because she was exercising authority, which she wasn't, by the way, That's a them problem, and they can take to their fourth step one day. But the point is, anybody who's doing any kind of service is contributing to the group, but do not call the shots at all. And that's a really important mindset for me to have because, as I said, I end up in charge of a lot of things, not on purpose. Like I started this group, right? Am I the boss of this group? No. I open the Zoom room and I send out announcements and I make the recordings and make them available, but I'm not in charge. Um, I'm being here of service to you and to myself, obviously. Um, but that's what this is. This is not about me being in charge. If you guys all went into our WhatsApp group and said, listen, Ria, we're not really interested in this anymore, or maybe we should do a different format, or we're tired of hearing your voice and maybe we should have somebody else come in. Fine. I'm not in charge. That would be the group conscience. I just made this available literally so that I would be able to do some service at the time that I started, and then it just picked up. So the point is, this is, even though it's quote unquote about me because I'm talking, it has nothing to do with me. This is just a tool that I am making available to anybody who wants it at the end of the day. This is not the Ria show. As much as I'd like it to be, because I'm me, but it's not. And in the 12 and 12, they also talk about real and permanent leadership of AA or OA, right? Like the people who I want to listen to are not necessarily the loud, talky, chatty people, or even people who talk a big game, because first of all, I'm really allergic to like guru culture. And I've seen it even in OA where people like get really excited about like one speaker and like sort of genuflect. And I find it all really gross. That's just me. And in fact, when people even say to me, like, you're so amazing, half of me is like, hooray. And the other half of me is like, I have no answers. Like, don't rub my belly. I have no answers for you. I'm just, I've just been around for a while. That's literally it. But here they describe somebody who's a real leader. Theirs is the quiet opinion, the sure knowledge, and humble example. They lead by, and they do not drive by mandate, they lead by example. I love that so much. I remember when I first got abstinent, this is like, I don't know, 20, whatever, a long time ago. And I had been on a million diets my whole life. So my family certainly wasn't going to be like, oh, Ria's got it. This is the beginning, And I intuitively sensed that if I didn't talk about it and I just did it, they would see that this was different. And that's what happened because I didn't really make a big deal about it. I just sort of went about my business. I went to my meetings, and to this day, my family asks me, like, you still go to meetings? Like, do you still eat that way? And they know because they know that's what I do. And it's because I just quietly did it. That's what this is about, A lot of the time, I quietly go about my recovery. I lead this once a month as an act of service, but I'm not like at a million meetings, leading a million things, doing a million shares. That's partly because of my life responsibilities, but partly because I'm just here to help. People who know me know where I am, they know how to find me. But really, it's about quietly saying, this is what my experience has told me. I've talked to people whose experience I respect. I ask their opinions, and then I quietly go about my business. This is an example I strive toward. I am not perfect at it, but according to the traditions, the best way to lead and the best way to have an influence in a group is to be quiet and humble. Those are the most powerful movements, being quiet and humble, which are the opposite of what I am. I am loud, brash, and obnoxious. So the work that I have to do is get more quiet and get more humble because I have an opinion about freaking everything. And the truth is, nobody actually cares. Like nobody needs to hear my opinion about anything. Somehow I think that everybody needs to hear it, but they don't. I just need to be quiet and humble and do my thing. And that's the example. The other thing that they talked about is, oh, what we've got won't run on ethics only. Um, this is a matter of life and death. So in other words, it's true that I can do things for an ethical reason, but at the end of the day, ethics aren't going to motivate me. It's the stakes of, it's nice to say, yes, be quiet and humble because it's good to be a quiet and humble person, but that's not going to motivate me. The motivation has to be if I don't learn and start adopting those qualities, I'll die. Um, because if I'm fighting other people, particularly in this program, I am literally putting poison into the thing that could save me. And I don't have that luxury. So I have to humbly go along with what it is and accept whoever's there, even if I don't like them. Acceptance and liking are two different things, but I have to accept that they're there. The other thing that Bill notes in the second tradition is this concept, and I think he's quoting Abraham Lincoln here, that the enemy of the best is the good. In other words, if I can get by with something that's good enough, why would I need to work harder to get the best? But the fact of the matter is, I can't settle for that. Like I said before, I know people who have been in this program for years and years and years, and they're moderately happy, and that's good enough for them. But I'm not fulfilling my full potential if I do that. I'm not really utilizing what this program has to offer if I do that. I have to continue striving for the best, even if I never get there. I cannot be complacent just because I'm comfortable. And it's the same thing with the group also. If a group gets too comfortable, it's in danger of, not reaching new people or not welcoming new information into the group. As I said, what I've said in this group before, when I first got abstinent, there was a big focus on food plans and abstinence and blah, blah, blah. Then came a movement of people who were really into the big book. And I remember in that meeting that home group at the time, somebody started talking big book and they ripped her apart. To this day, it still doesn't make sense to me. But the point is they ripped her apart because they were comfortable with what they were doing. And quite frankly, I needed to hear what she had to say because good enough, being abstinent and losing lots of weight was not good enough for me because I was still super uncomfortable. I still had that restless, irritable, and discontent, even though I was 100 pounds later. It didn't matter. So I needed something more. I could not be complacent. So, I and the groups that I'm in have to look out for, like, are we being comfortable? Are we avoiding conflict because we're concerned about people not coming? Are we allowing things that are inappropriate just because we don't want to rock the boat too much? Don't swap out the good for the best. Because ultimately people might lose their opportunity to recover if I'm not offering the best. If I came in here and talked to you about my food plan, I would be not doing a service to you. I need to talk to you about the solution, right? So that's what they're saying here. Let's jump to tradition 3. The only requirement for OA membership or AA membership is a desire to stop eating compulsively. So the long form, our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover, nor ought AA membership ever depend on money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that as a group, they have no other affiliation. So this is the first time in my life I ever came to a place and I was accepted just by virtue of my saying that I belonged. I never belonged anywhere. But here it says, you are an AA member if you say so. You can declare yourself in, nobody can keep you out. I don't know about you, but I've never been to a place where there weren't like requirements for being part of something. I was always an outcast. I was always excluded in my life. And to be able to come in and never, like I can never, the only way that I am not a member of this group anymore is if I leave and decide that I'm not. Nobody can kick me out. Nobody can say I'm not welcome. That's huge. That's really huge. And it's funny because I work with newcomers. I've been working with newcomers, you guys. Aren't you proud of me? I'm like, have not worked with newcomers for a long time, but I'm trying to now, and it's actually nice. Anyway, see, even an old dog can learn new tricks. Anyway, so what was I going to say? So I have somebody who says, yeah, but like, what are the rules? Like, if I'm not working, like, I don't know what the steps are. Can I still be in? Do I have to learn the steps first? And I'm like, no, just come to meetings. You're in. The end. You get to be here. You may decide that you're not even a compulsive eater, but you still want to be here. You can still come. It doesn't matter. Like come, you're in. Anybody who wants to stop eating compulsively, and that's what the great thing about it, especially in OA, is that a lot of people, particularly people with like bulimia and anorexia, they hear Overeaters Anonymous and think that it's not for them, but really it's about anybody who's compulsive about food. That's it. So even though I have a history of overeating and came from a very high weight, I also went to the other side where I was an exercise bulimic and an actual bulimic and restrictor. So I'm just compulsive about food. I'm just weird about food. That's how it is. So it doesn't matter if I'm binging or starving or something in the middle. It doesn't matter if I've never been more than 5 pounds overweight, but all of my mental real estate is taken up with food. I'm welcome. That's it. And that's beautiful. They talk here. This is actually really funny. We read this in my meeting last week, but it says that when AA first started, they only wanted to have pure alcoholics in. Only people who are alcoholics. And that meant so beggars, tramps, asylum inmates, prisoners, queers, that I'm quoting the book, okay? Plain crackpots and fallen women were definitely out. So I don't know about you guys, but queers and fallen women are my favorite kind of people, okay? And they are all over this fellowship. So they said later that the reason that they didn't let them in was because they were intolerant. And fear is the true basis of intolerance. They were so afraid of their sobriety getting infected by outside issues that they considered not letting people in who were a little different. Now, but then they concluded to take away any alcoholic's full chance was sometimes to pronounce his death sentence and often to condemn him to endless misery. So how can I do that? What if they said that only people who follow a certain religion could come in, or people who had only weighed a certain amount could come in, or only overeaters could come in? What happens to the bulimics and the anorexics? They could die. So we don't have the luxury of keeping anyone out. First of all, they need us and we need them more. Because if they don't come in and we don't have a fellowship, we all die. We don't have the luxury of picking and choosing. We need everyone. And everyone who comes in, even if their experience is different from mine, they may say something that blows my mind. Because ultimately, this disease is the same. It manifests differently, but the disease is the same and the recovery and the solution are the same. And so if we're all actively seeking a relationship with the God of our understanding, we're all going to pick up some really interesting knowledge along the way. And I want to hear what you have to say about that. And I don't care if you starved yourself down to 60 pounds. If you are now seeking God and you have had an experience, I want to hear about it. It's irrelevant where you came from. If you don't want to eat compulsively anymore, you get to be here. Full stop. Okay. So let's go to tradition 4. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or OA as a whole. And then the long form, this is a long one. With respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups also, those groups ought to be consulted, and no group, regional committee, or individual should ever take any action that might greatly affect AA as a whole without conferring with the trustees of the General Service Board. On such issues, our common welfare is paramount. So this basically means, boiled down, that every group can manage it says here, every AA group can manage its affairs exactly as it pleases, except when AA as a whole is threatened. So what does that mean? Means that, for example, I have my home group here, and we do things the way we do them, and it's fine. And if we vote to do it differently, that's fine. But let's say we want to have a convention, right? Or we want to have an idea day or something like that. And it's for this section of the country that I live in. And other groups are going to be, we've invited other groups to come. So all of a sudden, it's not just us being like saying what we're going to do. All of a sudden, it's, okay, well, we need to include these people because they may have insight or feel more comfortable with that. Or let's say we want to make a motion that everyone in Israel has to have their format this way. We don't get to do that. Every group gets to decide what they do. And intergroup and World Service get to decide on the guidelines of OA as a whole, but they don't tell us what we can do in meetings. It's reciprocal. Okay. I can't tell other meetings what to do, but the higher authority, even though they're not authorities, they're servants, cannot tell us what to do either. They can give suggestions, but ultimately we get to decide what we're going to do on an individual basis. And it's the same, and that works on a microcosmic level too. I can't tell, I can only work the kind of program that works for me, but I cannot tell another person how to work their program. I can make suggestions based on what's worked for me, but ultimately everybody's going to find the thing that works for them. For example, my food plan could kill somebody else, literally. So I can't decide for them how it's going to go. However, if I decide to start a meeting with other fellows, we then have to work together to make that work. So it's like microcosm, macrocosm. Okay. A group ought not to do anything which would greatly injure AA as a whole, nor ought it affiliate itself with anything or anybody else. So, okay. If, for example, I have okay, I'll give you an example. For a short while, we were using my synagogue as a space for our meeting. We're not using it anymore, but we did. Now, that's totally fine. We were a separate entity and we were paying rent, and that was it. However, if we start saying that we are either a Jewish organization or we are a subset of this particular synagogue or, a club as part of the synagogue, we can't do that. We have to stay unaffiliated. We are our own group. We are not affiliated with anything else. Okay, so, and that threatens other groups. In the tradition, in the 12 and 12, they talk about how this guy decided that he got like all hyped up about AA and wanted to start this like center with like an educational wing, a hospital wing, whole situation. And it just became so convoluted and it fell apart. And so the bottom line is don't take yourself too damn seriously. And I'm not swearing, I'm reading it out of the book, okay? So thus it was that under Tradition 4, an AA group has exercised its right to be wrong, right? My OA group may decide that I want to run something a certain way, and we may be way off base, but that's our right to discover that. Like region, I think we're region 9, I want to say. Region 9 can't tell me if we're doing it wrong. We're going to do it wrong and we're going to figure it out. It's the same thing with our co-OAers, right? It's the same thing as a sponsor. I made choices I remember when like 5 or 6 years ago when I started thinking about being able to eat the way I wanted to eat again. And my sponsor at the time was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And so I fired her because I wanted to do what I wanted. And guess what? I reserved the right to be wrong, and I was way wrong on this one. And I had a relapse. So, but I came back. The truth is I didn't even leave. I just had a different sponsor at the time, was working a program. But the point is, like, I reserve the right to be wrong and learn through my process. And that every OA group has that right as well. So, okay, let's go to Tradition 5. Joe, how am I doing on time?
You've got 7 left.
7 minutes? Holy sugar. Okay, fine. So we're gonna go really fast then. Okay, traditions. Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. This one is basic. We don't get to keep our abstinence if we don't give it away. And we have to look out for the ones who are still sick. I have to look out for the newcomers. I have to look out for the people who are really struggling. And my job ultimately is to take what I have and give it to them. Hence why we're here today. Okay, Tradition 6.
Ria, sorry, you've got 7 till the 40 minutes, and then you've got another
So
5.
I still have 12 minutes. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, fine. So I'm looking, right. So this one's fairly simple. We have one primary purpose: carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. In other words, if I have a group and I decide that the group doesn't let in anyone who doesn't have less than certain amount of abstinence, as a group, we have a right to do that, but we're totally missing the point. Everybody who needs this program we should be making it available to them. That's my job, is to take what I have and give it to whoever wants it. That one's pretty simple. Okay, Tradition 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, Less problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Right. In other words, OA should never go into business and never affiliate, endorse anything actual or implied. We cannot bind ourselves to anyone. In other words, they say most alcoholics are bankrupt idealists. In other words, we have big ideas, but we do not have what it takes to back it up. And we can't be everything to everyone. We're just here. Our primary purpose, as we said, is to spread the message. We can't be medical experts and psychology experts and life coaches. We're not those things. We're not. We do. They say in here, which is, and actually I'm going to start using it. They said it's better to do one thing superbly than a lot of things badly. So the one thing superbly that we do is help people find recovery. So we're going to stay in our lane and focus only on that. Because the minute we start mixing in other stuff, we dilute what we're trying to do and we compromise our integrity. So we need to keep that to a minimum. Tradition 7, every OA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. Again, the bottom line here, they say whoever pays the piper is apt to call the tune. So if we're taking money from people outside of OA, all of a sudden we're beholden to their input and what they have to tell us. I had somebody once who I took a loan from them, and I didn't realize that I was signing up for them to tell me how to use that money. I asked for the loan, they gave it to me, and then from then on, they felt like they had not only input in how I spend, but how, like, my life choices. I signed up for that. I didn't realize it at the time. I was naive. And so that's why we don't take money from anybody else. Nor do we accept freebies from anybody else. For example, I have a studio next to my house where we have 2 meetings a week, and I take rent. I give it right back to the seventh tradition, but I take rent. It's like a minimal amount, but I do it, excuse me. So that way the group is self-supporting and they're not beholden to me. They're paying me for the space and that's it. And then I just put the money back. So it doesn't really matter. Also, they talk about this idea of a poor corporation. In other words, we're not here to like save up gobs of money and then like have a party. We're supposed to have bare running expenses plus a prudent reserve. That's about it. If we see that we're up, if a group sees that may have more in their kitty than a certain amount, they're supposed to donate it, or they're supposed to give it to World Service or to their intergroup or to whoever. Like, we should not be holding on to money. Because money and recovery don't mix well. Okay, alcoholics should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. The fundamental difference, what this really means is, if there is somebody I need to pay in order for me to do 12-step work, I should pay them. For example, if we have an office where somebody needs to answer the phone or answer emails, like, that's their job. The people we can pay are people who facilitate and enable 12-step work to happen. What I can't charge for is doing step work with people. That's the fundamental difference. I know of somebody who asked someone to be paid to sponsor them. And it is so wrong. It is like wrong on so many levels. It's so not okay. Like, not okay. This is not a professional thing. We are not professionals. For example, if I got certified as an alcohol specialist and I went to go work in a rehab, that's totally different because that's a job. But within my program, within this fellowship, in no way should I accept money for being of service. So I'm just saying that. If anybody ever says to you, I'll sponsor you for money, no, like hard no, hard stop. Okay. The other piece that they say here is really great. Almost no recovery from alcoholism has ever been brought about by the world's best professionals. I mean, I think about my experience. I worked with all kinds of doctors and nutritionists. None of them could do it for me. Only another 12-stepper could help me. So the minute I become professional at this, I'm not going to be able to help them. So I literally take my effectiveness away. So I'm not going to do it. I will never accept a cent. Okay, fine. Let's keep going. Tradition 9, AA as such ought never be organized. And I have a friend who makes this joke, like when an OA meeting is like a little bit of a mess, she's like, well, we ought never be organized. But we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. Okay, so let's look at this one. Right. So in other words, we never have an organized authority to tell us what to do. And even the committees we create to help things happen are really only there as service and cannot tell anybody else what to do either. There's no rules. Anybody who's doing anything can only make suggestions, and that's it. Okay. Oh, okay. So this was great. I love this paragraph. So it talks about unless each AA member follows to the best of his ability our suggested 12 steps to recover, he almost certainly signs his own death warrant. His drunkenness and dissolution are not penalties inflicted by people in authority. They result from his personal disobedience to spiritual principles. In other words, all we have to do is set up the principles by which we're supposed to live and work together. Nobody has to enforce them, because if I go against them, the consequences are going to come naturally and they're going to teach me what I need to know. Nobody has to tell me what to do. If I'm fighting against something, it's my problem. And they talk about great suffering and great love are AA's disciplinarians. We need no others. There is no one in this program who needs to discipline. Thank you, Joe. I see you. Are disciplinarians. Like, there is nothing that's going to teach me more than my own experience. So it's not anyone else's job to tell me or anybody else what to do, and we don't have to. We have to let people have the dignity of their own experience. And again, when we authorize workers to serve us, it's the difference between the spirit of vested authority and the spirit of service. Two very different things, right? We're always focusing on a spirit of service, not authority. No one is in charge. There's no boss. Okay, tradition 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. Ultimately, the survival and spread of Alcoholics Anonymous. So our society will perish. We do not enter into public controversy because we know that our society will perish if it does. We conceive the survival and spread of alcoholics to be something of far greater importance than the weight we could collectively throw back of any other cause. Since recovery from alcoholism is life itself to us, it is imperative that we preserve in full strength our means of survival. That says it all, right? Like, we only have so many resources and we have one job to do, and we need to use every resource at our disposal to take care of that job, which is to help other people find recovery and to maintain our own recovery. And if we're busy taking those resources to go back, I don't know, like a climate change thing, we're taking much needed resources that are going to help us and giving it to something that is just going to, like I said, dilute what we're trying to do. We cannot get involved in other things. We cannot risk getting involved in controversy. It's just not our thing. We have to stay focused. Remember, quiet and humble. That's the bottom line here. Quiet and humble. Just get the work done. We're not out there to like proselytize, tell anybody else what to do. We're just here to help each other. That's it. Okay, let's see. Tradition 11. Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need to always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. So the way they outline it in the long form is there is never need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. Quiet and humble, baby. Quiet and humble. Being in the public eye is hazardous, especially for us. They say it in Tradition 11. And I can relate with that from personal experience. Not that I'm like famous or anything. But I remember when I wrote a book a few years ago and I toured around. And when I wrote the book, I talked a lot about my experience, but I never ever, because my first and last name were on it, I never used the words OA. I never said the words Overeaters Anonymous. I only described a 12-step group or a 12-step fellowship. Never said it because of this tradition. I did not want my name affiliated with it. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to adhere to the traditions. And also, like, if God forbid I go off the wagon and I'm somebody's only introduction to OA, then it's going to show them that OA doesn't work. And I'm not interested in that. If people are really interested in who I am, they can come talk to me one-on-one, but I will not advertise it in any public forum. This also has to do with humility. Personal ambition has no place in AA. Has no place in OA, right? This is not about me being out there as a person in OA. This is about OA existing without having any stars or representatives. Okay, Tradition 12, very quickly, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And it says here, the spiritual substance of anonymity is sacrifice. Because AA's 12 traditions repeatedly ask us to give up personal desires for the common good. So ultimately, this is that same trip toward humility, quiet and humble, right? So it says, humility expressed by anonymity is the greatest safeguard Alcoholics Anonymous can have. Anonymity is real humility at work. That's what we're trying to do. It's the same thing. We protect our anonymity and we protect other people's anonymity. The way they describe it here, every AA or OA member's name and story too had to be confidential if he wished. I have no right to share anything about any other person in this fellowship. When I hear it in a meeting, whether I hear it in a fifth step, it's not mine to give away. My anonymity, and by the way, anonymity as it's known now is very different from anonymity back then. In meetings and sometimes even in AA meetings now, people will use their first and last names because that's not that kind of anonymity. That's not particularly what they were talking about. Bill and Bob and all them, they all use their last names in the meetings. It was more about on an outside level, talking about other people's stories. We don't have to protect each other from each other per se. You know, I'll tell you my full name if you want. That's not really what anonymity is about. It's about taking information that doesn't belong to me and sharing it where it doesn't belong. And putting out there information that doesn't belong to me or things that about myself that don't really belong to me. The point is that if I go to a meeting and I see people here or I say something, I cannot tell anybody else who's there. And that's your right and your safety. And that's why our meetings are such safe spaces, because we know we can come in and literally say anything and it's not going to leave that room. And ultimately, thank you so much. And just to wrap up quickly, they talk about in the 12 and 12, this promoter instinct we all have, this person that goes out there and wants to like promote themselves. And this is the opposite of that. Moved by the spirit of anonymity, we try to give up our natural desires for personal distinction as AA members, both among fellow alcoholics and before the general public. So in other words, we're just trying to get quiet and humble. That's all. Thanks.